This is The Spot, a BYU-Idaho radio production where we talk about what you're talking about at BYU-Idaho. The views and opinions of this podcast are not that of BYU-Idaho Radio or the university and are solely the opinions of the hosts. Today's hosts are Savannah McCauley,
Megan Tomsik,
Cody Miller,
and Jesse Richens.
And today we're talking about preparing for the election and knowing what we need to do in order to vote. We've got a few little spot takes is what we like to call it. Kind of our own, each one of us have a little hot take that we'd like to read or talk about that we have opinions on the election. So Megan, what was yours?
So I personally find it hard to believe that why do we need to register to vote? Is it really necessary? I don't see why it matters if one person doesn't send in their ballot. And what difference does that make? You know, I haven't received a lot of information.
So each person, in my own opinion, each person can make a huge difference because as they are thinking about what they want for their country and how they want to live their life, if their specific ballot makes a difference in how they perceive or how they feel about the leader, I think that's what is most important. If you elected the person that is in office, you can say, hey, I'm one of those people who had control over getting that person in office. I helped us get this leader in office. You can say that if you've registered and you voted for that person. That's my own opinion on that specific thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Savannah. I think there's a certain feeling knowing that you've affected an election in some way. And so that's why I agree with you, why it's important to register to vote. That's what I think.
My little spot take is this. I believe that voting has more influence than most people think because you vote for more than just the president and vice president. And I honestly think that the state elections are just as more important, if not more important, than the presidential election. Because when we vote for our state representatives, they in turn vote for the president through representation through the Electoral College. So I think you should pay attention to your states more often than not.
And Cody, do we vote for state representatives at the exact same time as we vote for the national candidates?
It depends on the different election cycles, honestly. Such as, for example, this year, we're going to be not only voting for the president and the vice president, but we're also going to be voting for all 435 representatives of the House of Representatives this year. So if you want your state representatives to win, well, go out and vote.
My little spot take is make sure you do your research on your candidates. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I already know what side I'm on, so why? Why do I need to do that? Because each candidate is very different. As you can look at the candidates we have this year, I'm not as familiar with the independents, but I do know that some of them have very different policies than what side they're on. So you need to be more paying attention and not just voting one or the other or independent just because that's what you've always done. Make sure to do research on each candidate and find your sources that are actually relevant and people that you can trust. Watch people that know what they're talking about.
No, I completely agree. I used to let myself be influenced by just what other people said. I didn't want to do the research. I thought that wouldn't be helpful. But now that I realize just how important these policies are and how it will affect my life and the life of my future family, it's important that I understand what it is that I'm voting for, not just by title or, I guess, like you said, what I've always done. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is super important to do research, especially if you have a family, you do the research for your family, kind of just like you were saying. And or for yourself, like personal reasons. A candidate could agree with something that you agree with, but they could also disagree with something that's huge in your opinion. So, and I'm pretty sure the church has come out and talked about things like this, and they've said vote prayerfully and vote for what would be best for you and your family. My spot take is go out and vote early. I know we're going to talk about this later, but I think it is a huge deal. I understand that there's a lot of cultural reasons to go out and vote on the day, November 5th, Election Day. Obviously, it's a big deal, but it's very if you want a certain party to win, if you go out and vote early, it kind of helps them understand where they're at. And sorry if I'm taking away time from the later point, but yeah, it'll help if you go out and vote early. That's my take.
I 100% agree, Jesse. Actually, the first thing we wanted to talk about was voter registration. And actually, voting early is huge with absentee ballots. And if you don't know what an absentee ballot is, basically us college students are very much the big part of absentee ballots. So what that means is if you live in a state that you don't currently have
Residency?
residency. Yes, a residency in. So, for example, I have an ID from Virginia, and my residency is technically in Virginia. Even though I'm a student currently at BYU-Idaho, and I live in Idaho, and I've been here for 2 years, I still need to register to vote through Virginia, which means I need to register as an absentee voter. And that means that they send in the mail all of the things that I need so that I can vote, and then I send back through the mail my vote. That's what an absentee voter is, and if you need to do that and register as an absentee voter, there are different ways of doing that per state.
Absentee voting is considered extremely important because a lot of people are not living within their state residence, such as college students, for example, especially here at BYU-Idaho. But it can happen almost anywhere. Just be sure to register. But if you're from Idaho and you're registered in Idaho, you don't need to do this. But in case if you're moving anywhere else, please do it. Your vote counts. Your vote matters.
And on top of that, we do need to mention registration deadlines. And if you are going to be an absentee voter, the day after this episode is released, on October 11th, is the final day that you can register as an absentee voter. So it is very, very important. By tomorrow, if you're listening to this right when it releases, by tomorrow, make sure to register to vote if you're going to need to vote as an absentee voter. A couple other deadlines: if you're registering to vote online, then that's also October 11th. So make sure that you're registered to vote then. If you're in-person voting, you can register on Election Day. I would suggest not doing that, but because it just adds to the craziness. But you can. And then if you're in person during early voting, like Jesse was talking about earlier, October 21st through the November 1st, you can do your registration and early voting through that week.
Yeah, it's just super important to get out there, and just like Cody said, your vote counts. It really does. It's a right that's been given to us as the American people, so we need to get out and do that for sure.
When we were looking at several different websites, and there are so many to choose from, you can just use Google as your best resource, but one that we found that we really liked, that we wanted to mention to you guys was, I think it's voteidaho.gov. I'll say that again, voteidaho.gov. And it has information, let's see, oh yeah. So it tells you how to register to vote, whether you're doing it online or, like we talked about, mailing in a registration form, and they have links for that here as well. And then there's so many links, you guys, you just have to go and check this out. It tells you when you can vote in person and where you could go to do that, and what you need to register, which is super important, like a photo ID, a proof of residence, and so on. That's if you are voting as a resident of Idaho. And then it goes on to say who can register in Idaho, and gives you information about where to go to update your registration. Like if you haven't voted in the past 4 years, you got to go and update that, which is super important. I didn't know that until I started doing research for this. And it talks about how to change your party affiliation. There's so many things that you can go and talk about. And so out of all of the links that we've been talking about so far before we came here for this episode today, voteidaho.gov would be my biggest recommendation. But I don't know what the church has for like separate websites and voting and such.
Yeah, they have just a couple like statements online on the churchofjesuschrist.org page, and I'm sure with the upcoming election they'll release a statement. They do every election year, I've noticed. And I mean, I guess to go a little bit further into that, the church is nonpartisan. They don't. They believe in political neutrality as a religion. They don't suggest that, their members vote Republican or vote Democrat, or even I was reading into it even more. once you're an Area 70 and above in the church, you aren't allowed to participate in campaigns or endorse political figures, which was very interesting, but it makes sense because then, people would think like, oh, the church is, supporting this party or the other. So basically, I'm just going to read right from the website. Something that the church does encourage. It says it encourages its members to play a role as responsible citizens in their communities, including becoming informed about issues, voting in elections, participating in governance processes, and seeking for elected, appointed, or voluntary office. So it even does suggest oh, hey, if you want to go be a political figure, you can. But I like how it said, be informed. The church wants to make sure that we are keeping up to date and just how we talked about earlier, just stay informed.
And I agree with that. What the church is saying, be informed. We were talking a little bit about knowing the candidates and knowing who you feel is best to lead our country. And actually, Cody Miller, right here, actually got to talk to several students on campus about the policies that matter the most to them and the things that they had that were very passionate for them. So let's hear a little bit about what they had to say in Cody's Man on the Street interviews.
I think my biggest concern right now is just how whoever gets elected is going to handle the future problems that we have in America. I think yes, they're dealing with things right now, but we got to prepare for what we don't know, if that makes sense.
Let's see. So I'm not from Idaho, so I'm not up to date on the state election. But for the presidential election of the United States of America, my biggest concern is probably going to be economy and the following infrastructure, how things will change in that way.
I would say just the safety of the schools for the upcoming years.
Why would the safety of the schools be a concern for you?
Just because I have friends in the school system, and just with a lot of the recent school shootings, I just worry about them.
All right, well, for the most part, a lot of the people that I got Man on the Street interviews with is predominantly here at the Man-Wearing Center. So if you want to be a part of the podcast, come here at the Man-Wearing Center. But for the most part, a lot of the people were concerned about the future of America and about how the political leaders are going to represent the best of the people's interests. Where some people were talking about the economy, other people were talking about the housing market, and then a dear young lady was worried about how if COVID-19 comes back again, in which we hope it doesn't, but that's just me, but about how our leaders are going to respond to another pandemic like that ever again. And so people are just concerned about the future of America, and which is a very valid concern. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think these are very valid issues, and I think probably just about every student on this campus thinks about economics and all these things. I think it's very important, and that's why we need to stay informed about the candidates and decide which one of these issues is most important to you, whether again it be economics or housing or anything like that, and then looking and digging deep into the candidates to find out which one it is you want to vote for. These are very important issues, and we do want to know how they're going to be handled.
I know one of those students talked about safety in schools because she has friends that work in schools and kids, and that's definitely a huge issue right now. And just so you know, each candidate has their own way of addressing that. Make sure to look at their platforms and know exactly what they want to do to address the safety in our schools. That's another thing I felt like was very important that the student had mentioned in one of the interviews. I felt like it was important to mention that also in the podcast episode as well. Next, we want to talk a little bit about who's running. So, of course, we know about Kamala and we know about Donald Trump. So there are some independents on the ballot. We have Jill Stein and Chase Oliver. And you can find some of their policies on the websites with where you can vote. You can see the policies on their pages as well as Kamala and Donald Trump's. So you can see what they are supporting and the things that they are talking about in their politics and their policies.
One website that, here I am talking about links for this episode today, one website that I found really beneficial, especially for finding out information about the policies and the candidates and making sure that it was nonpartisan, was LWV.org. LWV.org. It's the League of Women's Voters. And so it's a nonpartisan website that works on protecting and expanding voting rights, ensuring that everybody has advocacy and education at the local, state, and national levels. And so this website gave a lot of good content about what the candidates were talking about, how that would apply to different locations of the country, and how that would apply to different people of different ages. And I liked that it didn't push me to believe one way or the other. I liked that it, like we say the word over and over again, nonpartisan, and that was really appreciated for me in order to find what I felt was right for me and my family and my situation.
So we talk about a little bit about reliable resources. How do we find reliable resources?
It can be tough. Unfortunately, in this day and age, I feel like a lot of legacy media stations have started leaning one way or the other, which makes it very hard to vote, because if for some reason, your parents have just watched a certain news station your whole life and you just think that's what you're going to watch. Unfortunately, sometimes you're going to get some biased news, whether it be Fox News, CNN. That's pretty unfortunate. So it can be hard to find. I might be stealing this from you, Savannah, but I have found quite a few resources on TikTok. I know that might sound crazy, but you can find independent kind of like news places on TikTok. One that I like to watch is Dylan Page. He's kind of fun. He's very, very popular. He hasn't been getting too much into politics, though, because he is not from the United States. But I do like to look to TikTok and try to find the independent, people on there who are usually nonpartisan. But that's where I like to find my resources.
There is more than one way in order to do research, and often one of the best ways to fact check is to look up an article that you see on Fox or CNN or any of those platforms, and then you go to the opposite side of the political spectrum in which they are leaning towards and see the same exact story. Then you compare notes between the articles. That way you can get the most bang for your buck. You get the most information that you can discern from it, the kind of consensus that they both agree on, and just get an overall more whole picture of the story. And I feel like in this world that's becoming more divided than ever, unfortunately, we need to consider both sides of the political spectrum in order for us to get the whole picture. Because if we lean to one way or the other, we won't get the full picture. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that makes us more radical, and that makes it a lot more dangerous.
I'd agree with you there, Cody. I think a lot of times people want to make it about sides. People want to make it about I'm here or I'm there. But really what we need to do is be informed, like the church is saying, be informed about all of the candidates and understanding who is best for us. Jesse was talking a little bit about independent journalists, and independent journalists on TikTok are my favorite to watch because when we say independent journalists, we don't mean they are specifically towards independence, but what we mean is they are on their own, doing their own research, but they are giving you the research that they found in a way that's bipartisan so that you understand what's going on in the world without having to worry about them being on one side or the other. They're just giving you the information. And that's where I found a lot of my reliable resources have been on TikTok. So we'll see how things go with the TikTok ban in January. Hopefully we can come to a good conclusion there. But I do love using it as of right now as one of my main resources for news and understanding what's going on in the election right now.
Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, and it's like our slogan here at the radio station, be informed, be inspired, BYU-Idaho Radio. We want people to find that good information and be inspired to take action with that information. Sure, you can research all you want, but if you don't do anything about it, then it doesn't make a difference. And so it's being confident in your research to take action. And in this case, making sure you go and register to vote and submit your ballot.
So we talked a little bit about TikTok. There are definitely several ways through social media that we can actually find these independent journalists. Is there any other social media platform that you guys use to get some of your news?
Well, predominantly one of my favorite platforms, unfortunately, I'm a little too addicted to it, is YouTube. But then again, YouTube, in a way, also has its own issues and stuff, but it can also have some major benefits as well when you're looking up both sides of the story. Each of the major news outlets, from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fox, CNN, NBC, ABC, so forth, all have YouTube pages that are linked directly to their articles as well. And they use YouTube as a base format as well for their videos. But you got to be very careful, because you got to look on both sides of the spectrum, because if you don't, your YouTube feed will automatically go towards one side or the other. But that's just how the YouTube algorithm is used to correlate. So if you look up on both things, then the YouTube algorithm should incorporate both of them at the same time. So just do with that what you will. Please look up on both sides.
Yeah, and I think, just to go off Savannah again, I think finding maybe not necessarily nonpartisan, but people who just deliver the news, and that's it. Again, some media companies these days, I think there's a little bit of an agenda on multiple media sites, which creates confusion and radicalism, as Cody was saying as well. So try to find those, again, as Savannah said, independent, not registered independent voters, but just independent journalists who just deliver the news how journalists are supposed to deliver the news, just straightforward and exactly how it was said.
There's one independent one. You mentioned one. What was his name?
Dylan Page.
Dylan Page. There's another one that I like to watch. Her name's News Girl, and she has a roundup as well. So you can actually sign up for her little roundup, which is just an email that she sends. It's an email blast with your news and just things that are going on in the world right now. And she keeps everything up to date for all the stuff that you need to know. So it's really cool. And she can send that to your email every single day, or I think it's at least once a week, but usually multiple times a week. So it's a really good way of finding news.
Two other people I found on YouTube that do news as well, ironically and unironically, are specifically these people. There's this YouTuber by the name of Good News Girl, who basically tells all about the article, or about the articles that you just don't read on major news sites, about good things that are happening in everyday humanity, and basically it just covers that in a very wholesome format that you won't be able to see anywhere else. And another one, ironically, his name is Habitual Line Crosser. Now, warning, this guy swears a lot, so take it with what you will, but the guy goes around and he makes satire commentary videos about the news and about how countries, or his reactions of countries, react to it. And it's supposed to be funny, unironically, but when he gets serious, it really gets serious. And I really like how sometimes he addresses some of the more serious topics with a less than lighthearted approach, but overall he's a pretty good one too. But warning you, he swears quite a bit, a lot. So take with that what you will, okay?
That reminds, something that you said, Cody, reminds me how there are people outside of this country that are so invested in our election and the process. And I feel like, Savannah, you have some commentary on this, but I think it's so interesting.
Yeah, actually on TikTok, there's a lot of people that are from other countries that will just get really involved in the United States national election. And it's really cool to see that they're just like, oh my goodness, like they're just more up to date than even some Americans I've seen on what's going on. And it's really amazing to see all these cultures really understanding and trying to understand us as a culture. And it shows how important us trying to figure out the right leader is, because other countries are watching. They're seeing us as an example. They're watching what we're doing, and we need to make sure that we are choosing a leader that is able to work with other countries and able to talk to them and be open to them asking them questions and being there for them. So that's something that's important to me, is just somebody who can talk to other people from countries and help, or other countries, and help them see what's going on in our country in a great way. So that's super important. One thing we talked about, we had all these independent journalists and all these people that were talking about, how do we check whether they're fake news or they're just trying to hype people up? What do you guys do in that specific scenario?
There is actually, it's an unoriginal name, but there is a website called factcheck.org. That's literally all it's called, factcheck.org. So it does exactly what you think it does. And it checks the accuracy of what the candidates are saying, statements that they've made. It provides an unbiased analysis and context, which I really appreciate, because sometimes you hear things, but you don't know in what context they were said, what was being talked about. And so this website is really beneficial. And I was taking a look at it just a moment ago. It's kind of like it almost seems like a news website, but it's not. It's not associated with any specific company. It just gives articles from just about both candidates, specifically the presidential affiliated party candidates. I haven't seen anything about independents, but talking about Kamala and Trump's standing and where they got their information from. So,
Yeah, I think you mentioned fact-checking, so I immediately thought about X, or formerly known as Twitter. I know Elon Musk has set up a pretty good fact-checking system on his platform. I've even noticed, I think he got fact-checked once. It was pretty funny. So they're pretty... they will check the facts on X, which is fantastic. So if you get your news from X, which is also... I've gone there quite a bit for some information on the polls and the election and everything. X can be a good place as well. It's been promoted as a free speech platform and obviously fact checker platform. So.
I love that. One thing I actually like to do, and Cody mentioned this earlier, is looking at a lot of different people, a lot of different resources, because I may watch News Girl, but maybe she's not as accurate as the one that you were watching, Jonathan Page? Dylan Page, sorry. Jonathan Page, I think, is a different person who's not a news person. So anyway, Dylan Page. So if I were to look at both of them and cross-check their facts I'm already going to have more accurate information because I know they both said this. Each one of them said something different here. Let's figure it out, kind of thing. So that's how I like to fact check a little bit. And speaking of facts, I actually want to check the audience and your guys' knowledge about what's going on in the election. These are super easy questions, but if you're not paying attention, then they're not. So when did Kamala Harris officially join the race? And I've got, multiple choice here, or we can just do it without multiple choice. What do you think?
We better do multiple.
Let's do multiple choice.
Multiple choice.
yes, please.
All right, so Kamala, did she join May 19th, June 25th, July 21st, or August 5th, all 2024?
I think July 21st.
I was thinking the same. I know it's not August. That's all I know.
I'm going to say July 21st as well.
You guys didn't think it was August, but it was. August 5th, she joined very late. Because if you remember, President Biden was running as the Democratic Party member for a long time. She actually joined August 5th. Can you believe that with how much she's been doing? That's crazy. Next, when did Donald Trump officially join the race? May 2nd, June 13th, July 15th, and August 1st.
I know that he was early on one of the main people behind it and stuff, so I'm going to say the earliest date that's on there.
Yeah, same here. May 2nd would be my guess.
I'd be guessing completely. You know what, just to be different, I'll say what the second one was.
So July 15th was his officially joining the race. But of course, a lot of people knew he wanted to join before that, but officially July 15th was the date. All right, and the next two. Who is the vice presidential running mate for Kamala Harris?
I would say it would be the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz.
Well, that was pretty confident, so Tim Walz.
Yeah. Cody, you got this.
Yes, Tim Walz is the correct answer there. And we have these answers as well. We'll have them on our social media post as well, so you'll be able to see them. And then who's the vice presidential running mate for Donald Trump?
J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance is correct. So, and J.D. Vance, Cody, can you tell us a little bit about him as well?
J.D. Vance was a military veteran, but he also serves currently as one of the senators for the state of Ohio as well.
I also really enjoyed Tim Walz too. I think he's just he feels like such a lovable father. Like, I don't know, there's just something about him. I think he's just a sweetheart, and he's got a good track record in Minnesota as well. So great candidate.
That's what I love about this election specifically. It feels like for each candidate and their associated representatives, like, it just feels like we're getting to know so much more about them and who they are outside of the politician in them. And so I feel like that's made it a lot easier for me to get to know them and find out really who I want to represent me and my beliefs.
Well, with this upcoming election thing, I personally think that we should just always just remain to stay informed more or less, because we need to be informed now more than ever.
Thank you, Cody. And I actually want to kind of wrap up the episode a little bit here and talk about how to become not as overwhelmed by all of this information. And I think one thing that helps me is staying in tune with the campus and what's going on campus with in regards to keeping myself up to date with the election. And a couple of things we have on campus that you can do that with is BYU-Idaho Radio. Of course, we got to mention us. You can find a lot of news through us on KBYI 94.3 FM. And we have the morning edition from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. every single weekday morning, and an afternoon show called All Things Considered from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And both of those shows are designed to help you stay up to date on local, national, and worldwide news, including elections and what's going on with the election. They will help you get to know what's going on in the election and provide facts about the candidates in both national and local elections. So you'll get to know what's going on around you here in Idaho and what's going on nationally. You can also follow the school's newspaper, The Scroll. Did you know we have a newspaper? It's a whole thing. It's wonderful. So The Scroll is also another thing that you can look up here on campus, and they have news topics and, of course, things about the upcoming election. So that keeps me a little calm, knowing that there's people around me helping me understand what's going on, not only in Idaho, but also nationally. Super, super helpful resources. And we did have a little bit of a spotlight on what's coming on or going on around campus. So what are some things coming up?
So this is super cool. So by the time that you'll be listening to this episode and be able to, once we have it on the air, this is from October 9th to the 11th. So depending on when you're listening, it's today and tomorrow. And it's the Red Cross Blood Drive. And I did not know that we did this on campus, which I think is so cool. And so it's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the BYU-I Center courts. So wherever we have devotional, there's the big courts right next door to that. So that's where it'll be taking place. And you can visit www.redcrossblood.org and search using our zip code 83460 to sign up for a time. So you go to that website, and that's where you would schedule your appointment, I guess you could say, and using that zip code 83460 to be able to go in and donate blood. It's really cool to support.
And thank you for mentioning that specific zip code, because that one is the one that's here on campus. I know it sounds kind of confusing, but Rexburg has 2 zip codes. So try to use the right one, 83460, when you're going to sign up for that blood drive. Thank you for informing us on that. You've been listening to The Spot, a production of BYU-Idaho Radio. Today's hosts were
Megan Tomsik,
Cody Miller,
And Jesse Richens.
And I'm Savannah McCauley. The views and opinions of this podcast are not that of BYU-Idaho Radio or the university, and are solely the opinions of the hosts. This episode was edited by Bia Matos. Producers were the hosts, with supervision by Brandon Isle and Natalia Hepworth. Our theme music is Finding Happiness by DJ Quads and The Perpetual Ticking of Time by Artificial Music. To listen to more episodes of The Spot, like and follow us on social media, or visit our website, byui.edu/radio, and click podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to The Spot podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review of the show and leave a comment on what we should talk about next.